Welcome in, welcome in. Sunday morning means it's time for the Blitz, brought to you by Triple Play Fantasy. We get it rolling right after this. Yes, indeed. It's time to get out of that kitchen and rattle those pots and pans. For this morning, I'm your host, Jeff Mesha. As always, we got Joseph and Mikey. Mikey's going to be popping in here and there. But, Joe, what's going on this morning, man?
Hey, man, I'm really proud this week, especially to be repping the Tommy Cutlets T-shirt because I feel at this point, I feel like he's the guy who got announced for the Royal Rumble. Everybody goes crazy. He runs down the aisle to the ring really fast, slides in under the ropes. As soon as he gets up, like the 700-pound guy who's in the thing, takes him and throws him out. And he's in for like 4 seconds. That was basically Tommy Cutlets 2024.
Well, I suppose that's better than what happened to the Chicago Bears. Oh, by the way, happy Thanksgiving, everybody. I hope everybody had a great holiday. Here we are the Sunday after Thanksgiving. So there's been a few games Thanksgiving Day. We had the odd Black Friday game. But I brought up the Bears, man. What a debacle at the end of that game. I couldn't believe it as I was watching it, as I'm sure you and everybody else was just dumbfounded.
He had to get fired for that one.
Yeah.
He had to. Because, at that point, and who knows if they would have won, and who knows if they would even have tied the game, but that should have went to overtime, which is, quite a performance for the Bears at Detroit. Quite a second half for Caleb Williams. For a rookie, that's certainly progress to see him do that against the Detroit defense on the road, nationally televised. And what this has got to be, a Bears fan would know, probably the third game this year they lost because of really bad coaching at the end of the game.
It's just been straight awful. But as we do on this show, and like I said, Mike is behind the scenes right now. He will be popping in this morning to maybe break a tie. But we take all your questions, fantasy, start, sit, whether it be DFS or your regular lineups. So it looks like perhaps, Mikey was about to pop in, but he didn't. But in any case, so we can kind of get it rolling with some questions. But first, before we go into that, Joe, what do we got for injuries this week? What are we looking at?
Yeah, it's great to know. We've been pretty quiet considering where we are in the season. Quarterbacks looking good today. The people that were in question, Trevor Lawrence looks like he will return for the Jaguars. Looks like Brock Purdy is going to play in that mess of a game that we're going to have in Buffalo tonight. So we're quiet on the quarterback injury front. The big injury running back wise for the week was J.K. Dobbins for the Chargers. Gus Edwards has now inherited that starting position. Breece Hall is questionable, expected to play. Other than that, again, pretty quiet. It's really shocking to be week 14. Austin Eckler on IR with a concussion. Brian Robinson back for the Commanders. You look at wideout. I guess the biggest wideout injury today is Devonta Smith out again for the Eagles. We know Olave's out for New Orleans. Josh Downs is out for Indianapolis, and maybe that's half relevant. That's really it for the wide receiver too. You get to tight end. This is not. Can you remember a week 14 with this few injuries?
Well, I can only because it's week 13. So I guess I can't recall a week 14 if it's week 13 yet. So
we should fix that typo on the screen here too. I was just Ron Burgundy in it.
So put in a question mark. It's week 14, so it's actually 13. So in most leagues, you're coming down to the wire. You got this game, next game, and then you head into the playoffs in most leagues. So it really makes things tight and interesting. So we'll see kind of what happens as things shake out today. So as always, or seemingly always, First question coming in hot from our boy Trans-Siberian. Always great to see this guy checking in. Saying,
wait a minute. Just in case his wife's watching, we got to give the women what they want.
And if nobody picked up on that, he was kind of giving us, or his wife had a question of why American men wear their hats backwards most of the time, even though Mike wears his forwards. But so I was wearing it backwards. Joe was wearing it backwards. He usually wears it backwards each week, but just to hide. Well, and you made a point. You kind of do look like you're in fifth grade with the hat facing forward, dude. So. All right. But anyways, so he says, hope y'all had a wonderful Thanksgiving. And okay, it's crunch time. Hunt laid a big turd, bro. You were not alone as far as that's concerned. I had a question on Thanksgiving, and I said in my flex I was going to go DJ Moore or Kareem Hunt. I leaned Kareem Hunt because they were home against the Raiders, and I thought that was the good move. Obviously, it was not. So I feel your pain right there. So he said your options for today are ATN or Brian Robinson Jr. or Shakir or Jackson Smith and Jigba. Shout out to Dirty Jobs. He's hearing that shout out, man. He's still here. He'll pop in here and there. So, Joe, I'll let you kind of take that one. We got a few options. What do you think?
Yes, sir. First of all, happy Thanksgiving to our good friend. And when he says Hunt laid a big turd, that's in his defense. That's 2 weeks he's talking, because that was last week we talked to him about Hunt. Hunt sucked last week, and then they suck this week. I don't get it. Then they're still winning these games. I would have thought it's shocking to me that both him and Pacheco were ineffective this week. Home against the Raiders, but that's what makes it the 2024 version of the NFL. As far as today goes, so I'm assuming we're picking one for a flex out of these four.
Yeah, that's what it looks like.
I don't think you can go Shakir based on we're looking at like a full-on snowstorm in Buffalo tonight. They're already clearing the field. JSN I like, and I like B-Rob. He's back for the Commanders. He's healthy. Eckler's out. So for me, it's either Brian Robinson or JSN. Ooh, and that's kind of tough. I don't trust the Commanders at this point anymore. I don't know what to expect from them. And you got to remember too, Tennessee's coming off a win at Houston last week, so they're not quite as inept as we thought. But I do like Brian Robinson with no Eckler. That being said, it feels like at this point the safest choice is JSN, because I mean he's on a streak where the targets are just plentiful for him. They're playing the Jets. They're at New York, but the weather's okay today in New York, other than being a little cold. So as much as I like B-Rob, I think here I'm going to go JSN, assuming it's a PPR.
Okay. All right. So, I mean, you got a couple running backs, couple wide receivers, as we typically say. The tie goes to the running back usually, but Etienne this year, I don't know what has gone on with him or the entire Jacksonville offense. We thought they were going to be halfway decent, and they're in the basement by a long shot. And so I can't necessarily trust what Etienne is going to do, even though it's a favorable matchup there at home against Houston. So you would assume that they'll put up some points, but I just can't necessarily trust that. What I would say, and I'm sorry, as he's checking in, just to clarify. So he says, no, I need a running back and wide receiver.
Very easy then. Brian Robinson and JSN. Easy pickings.
Okay. Well, you know what? Then if that's the case, that makes it easy for me as well. Because Joe mentioned the Eckler thing. I'm going Brian Robinson Jr. as well. And then between Shakir and JSN has just been on fire lately. I want to say he's got upwards or more than 30 targets the last few games. He's had a few touchdowns recently. He's almost turning into the number one option there for the Seahawks. And even though it's an away game, I still like JSN to keep getting those targets, perhaps getting the end zone again. So I'll go Brian Robinson Jr. as well as Jackson Smith and Jigba. I hope that helps you out there, Chief. And I will say that he's no Gabe Davis.
But I feel like the undertone in this message from our good friend this week is we need to redeem ourselves after Hunt these last couple of weeks. So I do feel pretty good about in these two scenarios, B-Rob and JSN. I would take JSN over Shakir regardless of weather. But if we've got a ton of snow in Buffalo, that makes me feel better about JSN too.
And just to give myself a little pat in the back, Mike has confirmed on the side that the last few games is exactly 30 targets. So I'll give myself one of these, man, just kind of keeping up on the stats. So appreciate you backing me up there, Mikey. So we got a question coming in from our boy Kevin. He says, what's up, fellas? 12-man, half PPR start, wide receiver 2. So we got Debo, David Moore, or Vele. Am I pronouncing?
Yeah,
I'm not
Denver.
sure who we're talking about here. Pardon me?
From
Devon
Denver.
Vele of the
Oh,
Denver
gotcha.
freaking Broncos, dude. Devon Vele. He's a
I see. Well, I'm just not up on my Denver Broncos offense these days, so my apologies, Kevin, for even just tripping over that one to start. So I'll let Joe lead off with that one.
I mean, if you know, and I like the caveat there. I prefer the safest option, by the way. So I think you do have to go Debo there. Well, actually, though, see, I'm thinking about that without the weather. You know, it might be. And I was looking at the weather in Denver because that's a Monday night game, Cleveland at Denver. But that game is looking like, other than maybe a little brisk, there's not going to be any precipitation there. And real quick, I'm looking at it. Vele, just and Mesh, we're going to blow your mind here. The last 3 games, Devon Vele has 18 targets, 14 catches, and almost 200 yards and a touchdown, 14, 10, and 14 on DraftKings. So given the weather in Buffalo, I think Vele is the way to go here. If we find out at 6 o'clock it's not snowing in Buffalo and they cleared the field, you might want to reevaluate. But I think as of right this second, 11:30 a.m. Eastern Standard Time, it's Vele.
So, you know, and I get the David Moore thing kind of thrown in there a little bit. And we always say don't get into the pitfall of judging a guy by his previous game alone. And that I think that seems to be what's happening here with David Moore. So that leaves us with Debo or Vele. Self-admitted that I didn't know the Denver offense very well. It seemed to me that Bo Nix was pretty much the entire offense. He's throwing to himself and running for a lot. But you know, Mikey's up to snuff on that more so than I am. So to me, the safer play is Debo because, you know, he's going to get some targets, certainly. I get it. The weather might be a factor, but he's also going to get some chances out of the backfield. I know McCaffrey's back and healthy and everything else, but you have to assume that Debo would get maybe a couple carries. So to me, Debo's the safer option. So, I mean, I don't know if you disagree with that. I mean,
Mikey!
Melee, but I mean,
Come
Mike,
on, Mikey.
you want to break the
There
title?
he is.
So, okay. So on this one, I think you're right. I think the safest play here is going to be Debo. Vele has looked really good over the past 3 or 4 weeks, getting more and more involved on that offense. The problem is you've got a lot of talent is the only way I can think to say it, but the Broncos really don't have that talent. They're making lemonade out of lemons is basically what I think is the best way to describe what the Broncos are doing. They don't have a whole lot of outward talent or anything like that, but they're putting it together and they're winning football games, but they're not doing anything huge offensively, right? So we're not breaking the bank by any means. So for me, it's got to be Debo, just because even if he's not getting passes, they usually find ways to get him the ball even out of the backfield. It's surely a volume play for me. I'm going to lean Debo.
Weather? You're considering weather, Mikey?
Yeah, weather is a factor for sure, but like I said, I mean, he seems like a guy that you game plan in one way or the other, even if it is just little short wide receiver screens or things like that. Now, I don't like the weather there, but again, I just don't like David Moore is a flash in the pan. We can't count on him to have another big week, I don't think. Vele has been consistent, but not consistent enough where I'm confident in putting him in my lineup. Debo Samuel's just one of those guys. I mean, we draft him in the second, third round for a reason because he can also.
He certainly has the highest ceiling. There's no doubt about that. Mark it down, Kevin. Tell us next week who effed you.
There you go. There you go. And Trans-Siberian, my man, I love you. He says, Mikey, you got no hat. I came on naked and I apologize.
And this is why he wears one, everybody.
I tell you, man. Yeah, Mikey's just showing up here with seemingly no pants on, bro. You know, that's might be a first for us too. See a Mike with no hat.
You'll never ever see me stand up during a show. I'll just say that right now. But yeah, no, that's the ones I'm going with. Trans-Siberian, shout out to you too, buddy. Love you. Hope everything's safe over there. But I'm going to go ahead and cut that out.
He's got to be taller than me.
Well, so before we get back into the questions, Joe, I'm looking at the schedule for today. And we're seeing some pretty decent games. But the one I'm specifically looking at is the primetime 4 o'clock game. You got Philly at Baltimore, and you got Barkley and Derrick Henry, who have been the 1 and 2 from a fantasy perspective all year long. Saquon Barkley, man, has been burning it up. And I believe it was maybe last week I switched, and I'm just kicking myself. I switched because of the salary. I switched to Joe Mixon because of how hot he had been from Barkley. That could not have been a bigger mistake in my life. But Barkley and Derrick Henry, who do you think comes out of that as the better option?
So, it's funny because Baltimore has a better run defense than pass defense. The Philly defense has been hot in general. But if you actually look at Derrick Henry, and I agree with everything you've said, they've clearly been the best 2 running backs in the league this year. But Henry's been under 20, and this is how high the bar is. He's been double digits, but under 20 3 straight weeks. Where Barkley, and I think the difference between the two of them fantasy-wise is if either of them get stuffed in the run game, Barkley can supplement that in the pass game where Henry doesn't do that. Justice Hill actually specializes in doing that. The other part of that, too, is no Devonta Smith today again for Philly. So I expect Barkley to play more of a role in the passing game, especially if it's a higher scoring game. So I like Barkley a little more today. He's a little more expensive, too, from like a DFS perspective, but I like him a little more.
No doubt. I think we got another question popping up here. Let's see. So super flex, we got Drake May or Kirk Cousins. So let's see. We got Drake May. He's home against the Colts, and Cousins is home against the Chargers. So, I guess I'll start with this one. To me, I wouldn't have thought that, earlier in the season that this would even come up as a question. Obviously May didn't start the season, but I tell you, man, I have to say, 51-49, I'm going May over Cousins just because of perhaps his running ability a little bit. And Cousins has been so hot and cold. He has some weeks that he's put up 30. He's had some weeks that he's put up 7. So I don't know your thoughts, and I'm leaning May.
Yeah, it's funny because Atlanta's had a couple games where you said it. Cousins has gone off. He's got a 28-point DraftKings game. He's got a 38-point game. But his last 3 are 5.9, 14, and 18. They're 1 and 2 in their last 3, but they can kind of win with Bijan Robinson. I think this game against the Chargers today is also a tough matchup. Charger defense is good. I think they're going to rebound a bit versus how they played against Baltimore. I kind of like Derrick May here too. Drake May. And I like it because on top of whatever he does passing, which will be modest, I like the rushing if you compare him to Cousins, who isn't really going to rush. May has gone for 5.34, 8.335 rushing attempts, all translating almost all of them in 25 plus yards each game. So he's going to get you a few points on the ground. They're playing Indianapolis, which isn't a great defense either, where the Charger defense is a much tougher, formidable one, versus Atlanta. So I actually think I would go May here a little bit.
Yeah. And since we're talking about that particular game, the Chargers have been sneaky good. They're 7-4, and it's almost like, how the hell did they get there? If you told me that the Chargers were 3-8, I would probably believe you because I just haven't necessarily paid much attention. They're not flashy. There's nothing exciting about them, but for whatever reason, somehow they end up 7-4 right now. In Atlanta, who was on top of that division a few weeks ago, got demolished by Denver, and it's just been kind of hot and cold. Atlanta is. It seems like on paper they're a really and a fantastic offense on paper, but it hasn't necessarily translated out all that well. I don't know.
Yeah, they're inconsistent. What are they, 6-5 right now? I think
they are.
And that division's up for grabs, obviously, with Tampa and them. But yeah, 2 interesting teams because even the Chargers now they lose Dobbins, so they got Gus Edwards in the rookie behind him, really at running back. It's going to be interesting to see how they do against the better teams. They've been pretty good at beating maybe the not as good teams, but when they play their next game against Kansas City, and obviously they lost to Baltimore the other night.
Yeah. And since you brought up Gus Edwards, I think that's a great play from a DFS standpoint if you're looking to get some value so you can sneak in because you got to look at Barkley and Jamar Chase. Those are 2 guys, in my opinion, that have to be in your lineup as far as a DFS standpoint. So you got to get some value somewhere. So Gus Edwards could be a good play just to offset that 10,000 or close to 10,000 that Saquon Barkley always is on DFS. You know what I mean?
Yeah, DraftKings, Gus Edwards is only like 4,300 this week.
Yeah, I think he's 58 on FanDuel. So, but I digress. We'll keep it rolling. Next question coming up here. We got, let's see here, Knicks versus Cleveland or Jaden Daniels versus Tennessee. I'll let you go ahead and take that one first, Joe.
While I'm excited about Bo Nix, and there's some scenarios where I'm playing him this week, I think here you got to go Daniels. And I'm worried about the Commanders a bit. I'm happy they got Robinson back, but I'm worried about the way they've been the last few weeks. Daniels through 3.5 quarters was not very good fantasy-wise last week. He threw the 98-yarder to McLaren or whatever it was, and that brought him to a 30-point game from like the teens. Home against Tennessee, you would think they would bounce back, but again, Tennessee won in Houston last week. You got Denver, Cleveland Monday night. Weather doesn't look to be a major issue in Denver. Cleveland's a pretty decent defense, though. They're also coming off a win against Pittsburgh. So I do, as much as I like Bo Nix, he has really been pretty good, and he does run the ball a little bit too. But I don't think I could bench Jaden Daniels for Bo Nix yet.
Well, I think we had a Daniels scenario last week, and that's why we were paying so much attention to that Washington Dallas game, and maybe Trans-Siberian can clue me back in as to who the other person was. I want to say maybe Jalen Hurts versus.
I'll be fully transparent. Every single week I'm throwing out to you and Mikey Hurts or Daniels because it's one of my scenarios I have in a league, and it's freaking tough. So yes, we've talked about that every single week. You're absolutely right.
And it looked to be a train wreck last week until, like you just said, that pass to McLaurin, and then he had a 2-point. I want to say he ran in a 2-point conversion, which put him around the 30 mark and made him worthwhile and made us look halfway decent for picking him. Because up until that point, I was like, Jesus, that's just going to demolish me as far as league is concerned, because I had him as my number one. But I mean, Knicks, they're both tough defenses. Cleveland and Tennessee both have actually solid defenses. Knicks at home, Washington or Daniels also at home. I mean, I guess I'll look at I believe the Washington game has a higher over-unders, a little bit more expectations for a little more offense. So I would say I would probably stick with Daniels too. I don't know if Mike, you have if you want to chime in as a Broncos fan, whether you think we're making a mistake or is Jaden Daniels the way to go there, bud?
I do think that Jaden Daniels is the way to go right there, just for the simple reason that I don't like Cleveland's defense. Cleveland's defense has really been shutting them down. I have a feeling this game on Monday night is going to be something like 10-7, 7-3. I mean, it's going to be real low scoring. It's going to be cold in Denver. I really think that Daniels is going to be the play, although, man, he has not been the guy. Now, last week he got us to the promised land, right? He got us where we wanted to go. But that was with like 3 minutes left in the fourth quarter before we finally saw some production out of that guy. So you may be sweating it a little bit. Tennessee does have a pretty solid defense, but I don't want nothing to do with that Broncos-Cleveland game at all, unfortunately. Again, I think it's going to be a great game, but I think it's going to be one of those defensive pounder games for sure.
Right on. Well, appreciate the input there. And yeah, you're right. I have the Denver defense, Joe, as you know, in our league, and actually both the leagues that I have, and they've been kick ass as far as the defense is concerned. Surprisingly.
I'll tell you what, man, it was a bad start to the fantasy league week for me on Thanksgiving. The Detroit defense was okay against the Bears. They probably got you like 6-10 depending on the scoring in your league. I expected more from them. And then real quick, the Detroit running game, which has been breaking records from a fantasy perspective, 2 guys. It's like Thomas Jones, Jamal Charles all over again. First game of the year, neither of them freaking score. So, and I have a league where I play both those guys, and they only got me 20 combined this week. So that was a killer. CeeDee Lamb stunk. They didn't need him against the Giants, clearly. And then, so it was a tough start to the week there but Detroit keeps winning. I mean, that was another bizarro one, as we talked about earlier. But
yeah, certainly. So we'll keep on rolling to the next question. If Mikey wants to pop that one up on the screen here, we'll see what we got. Let's see here. So we got full PPR. It's a love affair. Chuba or Aaron Jones. We'll see. Carolina, they are at home against Tampa Bay. Minnesota, they're at home against Arizona. Your thoughts on that one, Joseph? Full PPR.
Full PPR. I'll tell you, it's probably closer than you think. Like Chuba's last 3 DraftKings games are 15, 28, and 21. And I mean, the touches are, he's pretty much 20 touches a week. Last week he was 17. He doesn't do a lot in the air though. And Carolina, he does score pretty much all of their freaking touchdowns. It's just not a lot of touchdowns because it's Carolina. Aaron Jones went for 24 DraftKings points last week, but 5 the week prior. He's a little dicier, but so that's kind of tough. But I think I would probably go Aaron Jones. I feel pretty crappy about sitting Aaron Jones for Chuba and being wrong about that.
Well, I'm going to have to disagree with it on this one, I think, a little bit, only because we do have the Cam Akers effect in Minnesota. And even though Akers is not getting many touches, they seem to give it to him if they're inside the 5, or that seemed to pop up at least 2 or 3 times from what I can recall. And so that makes me pause a little bit on Aaron Jones, whereas that Hubbard is definitely the guy in Carolina, even though he doesn't necessarily get too many receptions. But the Cam Akers thing with Minnesota just makes me pause on that and go with Hubbard. I don't know if, Mike, you want to either put up a note or chime in on to break that one the tie there. I don't know what you think.
Yeah, so I like Chuba Hubbard in this. But, he's also got Jonathan Brooks to contend with, who just came back off of the PUP. He's starting to see a little bit more of a snap percentage on that offense as well. So I think if you look at the flex in between there, I really do think I'm going to lean Aaron Jones right here. But it's close because, it's tough because, Hubbard is about the only bright light offensively on that whole entire team. Aaron Jones is like the 5th bright spot on that team, and he's really good, right? It's just that so is Justin Jefferson, and so is Jordan Addison, and so is the rest of the crew there.
Hawkinson.
And now they got Daniel Jones, so who knows exactly what could happen over there, because, if you give me Sam Darnold or Daniel Jones, I'm probably going to take Daniel Jones almost any day of the week. And I have a feeling the NFL quarterback coaches are probably around the same mindset there. I think I got to lean Hubbard here. It's close though, man. It's really close. But I think Hubbard being the only thing that can do anything on that offense is the reason why I'm going to go with him right there.
Right. I think you can be hopeful to get like 15 from both those guys. So it feels like a win-win, hopefully.
Yeah, there we have it, folks. And Mike brought up the 5th option on the Minnesota offense. I believe it was last week this came up. I don't know if he's watching, but I think we owe Phil Iarachi an apology. He asked a super flex question. I want to say it was Tommy DeVito or Jordan Addison on Superflex, and the consensus kind of was at Superflex, you kind of got to lean quarterback almost all the time. And then what happens? Jordan Addison, I believe, had 5 or 6 catches for about 150 yards and 1 or 2 touchdowns. I forget, but he obviously blew the water out of Tommy DeVito and right on Joe's shirt there, right out of Tommy Cutlets. So an apology out to Phil Iarachi. I don't know if he watches Joe, does he?
Like he might be. I don't know if he is right now or not. But it's amazing too because Justin Jefferson literally has one of his worst games in his NFL career. So which is kind of bizarro. I think we banked on DeVito getting you 10 to 15 against Tampa, and clearly that was
yeah. Next question coming up, I believe, is once again from our boy Trans-Siberian. Mike, you're scaring the cats. Jesus, I guess we got to keep Mike behind the scenes without the hat. Or if he's got one nearby, just put one on, bro, because we can't be scaring cats over there in the Ukraine, man. So, but he said Lamar is my QB. Thinking about punting to Baker. Let's see here. 0.6 points passing TD. Am I crazy? Not sure how to read that one. Joe, you want to help me out with how to read that one?
Well, the one question I have is who he means by X Smith for Philly. I'm thinking he means Devonta Smith. And this is kind of interesting because Smith was more like doubtful. And now all of a sudden he's questionable. He's going to go through a pregame workout, but there's not a lot of optimism that he's going to be able to suit up. So I don't know if that's what he means or not. I think what he's saying at quarterback is he's in a league where typically passing touchdowns for a quarterback are 4 points. Some leagues give 6 points. This one does 6. I understand what he's saying, and I get the thought process, but no, I personally would feel pretty heavy not to go and bench Lamar, because the bottom line is this: Lamar could take a rushing a run for 70 yards and a touchdown in the first quarter, and he's off. Not to mention the fact that that should be a higher scoring game. Tampa's got these 2 running backs now with White and Irving. They, again, just like they did against the Giants last week, Baker Mayfield, he had a good game. He didn't have to do a ton. They ran all over the Giants. They could do the same against Carolina and not need Baker, where I think Baltimore's clearly will need Lamar to have a heck of a game to win today against Philly.
No, my apologies for the confusion on that question. What was throwing me off is the no spaces between the period after Baker and then the 6-point passing TD. So I didn't know necessarily how to. I thought it was Baker point, 6 point. I wasn't too sure exactly how to read that. So, but I agree with you, Joe. I think are you crazy? Yeah, you can't sit Lamar. Let's just hypothetically say you do, right? And you go to Baker. Baker has a decent game, and then Lamar just absolutely goes off, which he can do. There's no question that he has those games in him. And if in Philadelphia, I want to say it has the highest over-under of the week. So to sit him for Baker on the road at Carolina, I get it that Carolina's not that great. But, yeah, you're a little crazy if you're going to do that.
So real quick, let's play this out, because this is one of our, our most loyal fans. If you look at Lamar this year on DraftKings, he's got 2 games under 20. And it's 15.9 and 17.4. And then he's got 1, 2, 3 games over 30. If you look at Baker Mayfield, who I love, he has got 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 games under 20, 2 games under 10, and he hasn't hit 20 since week 8. Now, granted, he also has 3 games over 30 and 24 touchdowns, but I think the stats are in the pudding there, and Lamar's got 27 touchdowns, so he actually has 3 more passing touchdowns than Baker Mayfield, in addition to the rushing X factor.
Well, so that pretty much, I hope that answers your question, brother, because it's really kind of a no brainer at that point to go Lamar. Before we get back into a few more questions here that we got teed up. I mean, looking through the lineup, we already got 4 games in our pocket, but after the Philly Baltimore game, you got the primetime game, San Francisco at Buffalo. I mean, Buffalo has been a freight train lately. San Francisco, we thought they were going to be a Super Bowl contender, and they have kind of fallen off badly. Do you think the Niners have a shot to go into Buffalo and pull an upset on the Bills that are on a runaway freight train, dude?
Not with this weather. And I saw Bosa's out for the Niners. Their Hall of Fame offensive lineman, which all of a sudden I can't remember his name, is out. So I don't, and Purdy's just coming back. I don't see it, especially with weather. Now, granted, you think they could run with McCaffrey. I get that part of it. But the Bills have just been, they can run with Cook. They can run with Allen. It's at home. I don't see it happening this week for the Niners, especially given their health. Well,
and because of the weather, especially from a DFS standpoint, should we really go high on Cook? Is that somebody who you really want to throw in the lineup, or do you want to eat salary on Josh Allen?
You're lucky because they're not in the main slate because it's the night game. So, what I probably do with that game, if weather really impacts it, I would keep it out of any multi-game slate from a DFS perspective, but I would do the single game because the fact is there's going to be a high point scorer and a low point scorer within that one game. So I would probably keep that game separate from a DFS perspective if the weather is going to impact it as much as it looks like. But I would still say I love Cook and Allen, and I probably like McCaffrey a good chunk too. I mean, I don't know. We saw it in Pittsburgh, Cleveland last week. Like, they do still throw the ball a bit. It's hard. It's like, how much do you really let it impact what you would normally do fantasy-wise? It's like when a guy's been questionable all week and he's a true game-time decision, and then 15 minutes before the game, you get the report that he's playing. Sometimes those guys go out and score 30 points, and you never knew they were hurt. Other times they're a decoy, Rob Gronkowski back in the day, and they don't get any targets, So those are tough situations.
It's an interesting one since we're just talking about DFS real quick. Don't mean to go off on a tangent, but you mentioned they're not in the main slate. So FanDuel's actually switched things up. So FanDuel's main slate keeps in the 8 o'clock game. So that is part of the main slate now, which makes things a little bit more difficult as far as salary-wise, what you're looking at. Because, if the San Francisco-Buffalo game was not in the mix there, then we wouldn't be having this discussion. It would be easier just to pick somebody else and go from there. But
you know what? Yeah, I think you got to look at – I would assume Cook's probably a little cheaper than McCaffrey. So, yeah, I would probably – but then again, do you like Cook more than Barkley still, or even a Bijan Robinson, or, potentially a Derrick Henry, although I don't love Henry this week necessarily. That's tough.
Well, let me give it – so, Henry, you got 9,000. We're talking FanDuel here. McCaffrey, 8,800. Bijan Robinson, 8,500. And then you get down to James Cook, 7,800. So 7,800. So he's 1,000 less than McCaffrey. I'd have to say that's, of course, I did this last week with Barkley and Mixon, and it really bit me in the ass. But you'd have to think that Cook would perform a little bit better than Mixon did last week. But you
would think. The only issue with Cook is Allen can run him in sometimes.
That is true. So,
I think we got 2 questions left coming from Twitter?
I think what do we got coming up here, Mike? Let's see here. We got Daniel. This question again. I'm going to let Joe handle at least the Daniels or Hurts one.
It's my question. Help me, God. No, I don't, and I've had other people ask me the same thing. If you remember correctly, Hurts obviously one of the first 3 to 5 quarterbacks that went in a fantasy draft, where Daniels went on farther down the line, obviously as a rookie, not playing a game yet. So there's a lot of scenarios where you got one of the better quarterbacks and then you got Daniels sitting there too. What do you do at this point? It's hard. It's really hard. This game this week, no Devonta Smith for Philly. Well, I guess we don't know. Assuming no Devonta Smith for Philly, you have these weeks now where Barkley's scoring 2-3 times, running for 200 yards. That takes production away from Hurts. But then if you go back 2 weeks, Hurts had the multiple rushing touchdowns. Where Daniels had a 30-point game last week that was 55 minutes through it. I don't know. It's really hard. I kind of like Hurts a little more this week because, you think that's a higher scoring game. I know Devonta Smith, I guess, hurts him a little bit. At the same time, Barkley can be relevant in the passing game. The Commanders are just scaring me a little bit right now. Partly I think Brian Robinson means more to them than people thought. So I think not having him healthy the last couple of weeks is very impactful. So glass half full, Robinson's back, even though they lost Eckler, and it kind of makes the whole offense right again. I do think that's possible home against Tennessee. But I don't know. It's hard to see Hurts having a bad game unless Barkley goes for 250 again.
Well, even if he does, sometimes Jalen Hurts will still have a good game. He's just been more consistent. So let's look at it, because we were talking about how nervous we were about Daniels up until about the 5-minute mark in the fourth quarter, because it looked like he was going to lay an egg. So had that happened, the previous weeks before that, he had 14.4. The week before that, 8.5. And so he hadn't, even before that, 19.8. So he hadn't hit the 20 mark since about 5 weeks ago. And Hurts has just been pretty consistent. I think he's only been below 20, maybe as far as FanDuel points once this year. So consistency-wise, I think Hurts is there. For whatever reason, Daniels is not doing as well as he did in the first half of the year. So I would lean Hurts there. And Knicks or Cardinals.
You sold me. Those numbers sold me, by the way.
Okay.
Hurts is so consistent. And I know last week was a little weird for him because Barkley went so off. But you're absolutely, Hurts has been the pillar of fantasy consistency, even when they're not winning games.
Yeah. And then to get into Knicks or Carr, I think to me this is a no-brainer with Bo Nix lately. Carr just does not have that rushing ability. So you got, the last 5 weeks from Bo Nix, 29.7, 18.2, 16.1, 31.7, 19.4. You have that upside of the 30 plus with Bo Nix, where you really don't with Derek Carr.
You're right about that. I was thinking about the weather in this game Monday night in Denver, but it looks like it's going to be dry and just a little cold. Carr has 18 and 20 his last 2 games, so that's a little more consistent. But you're right, it's not on the ground. I will say, I don't know, maybe I'm crazy about this, and I agree, Philly-Baltimore, but that Rams-Saints game, 2 teams that are like, well, New Orleans is definitely out of it. The Rams are hovering. They don't have great defenses anyways. I'm feeling like that's tracking to be like a crazy, like 34-30 type game, that's why it's making me think about Carr, where Denver, Cleveland, 2 good defenses. Denver obviously playing for playoffs. That's what made me waver a bit. Obviously, the weather impacts in New Orleans either. But I think Nixon, running ability makes me feel a little more comfortable with him. But it wouldn't surprise me if that Saints game is really high scoring.
Well, it could be, and it could be. The Saints are coming off a bye, and they're also coming off a monster game from Taysom Hill. So that guy, had put up 40, I think, before the bye. So you do have kind of that. You have that. Makes me pause there. You said he had 18, 20 the past 2 weeks. Before that, he had 13, 9, and 8. So
you're right. And let me tell you something. Having Derek Carr in any way fantasy-wise and watching him get to the 5-yard line on 1st and goal and then seeing him come out of the fucking game, there is nothing more aggravating than that. So for that alone, I think I'm sold on Knicks.
I think we got a question coming in here. We'll see it from another one from Trans-Siberian. Checking in week 14 defenses to beat the waiver wire. Saints at Giants or 49ers home against the Bears. Joseph.
So first of all, I think Trans-Siberian literally, and we might have to start getting this guy on the official taxable bracket here, because I feel like this should actually be a segment each Sunday, because you're at week 13 right now. You're fighting for fantasy playoff, your playoff life. And it's a great example because I went into this week playing the Detroit defense in 3 out of my 4 most important leagues, thinking home Thanksgiving against the Bears, they're going to go off. And they weren't horrible, but they weren't very good. And that could be the difference in a close game. So I think it's important to look at the defenses every week. I appreciate the question, my friend. So the 49ers are week 14 defenses to beat the waiver.
Right. So we're looking a week in advance here.
So I think even though the Bears weren't horrible the other day, I think out of those 2 choices, I cannot trust the Saints defense in any respect. If the Giants defense was motivated to give 100% effort, I wouldn't hate them, but they aren't right now, clearly. So I think you got to roll with the 49ers, assuming they're still playing for something.
All right. And before I get to how I'm going to answer this, he chimes in to say, this is all comes down because he's in first place. He's saying, so this is really crunch time. He's got to stay there. So what we have seen is, well, or at least what we saw, because you got Drew Lock on the Giants, is that he can give the ball away and give some points to the other team. So, I mean, I don't know if that trend will continue, but I think Caleb Williams just doesn't turn the ball over. He just doesn't. So the opportunity for the 49ers to put up more points than the Saints against the Giants, I think, is not as much as Drew Lock throwing a pick 6 here and there, So, yeah.
So I guess the good news is we can watch the Saints today. They're home against the Rams. Decent offense, definitely a better offense than the Giants. So if the Saints defense doesn't get crushed today, I guess you feel better about going Saints next week. If the Saints give up 40 this week, you might have to reevaluate.
So to be determined, but the week in advance, I'd go Saints, and we'll just we'll see how things shake out today. So I think we got one more question, at least coming in from Twitter. Mike, if you want to pop that one up there. Let's see. Okay. Well, I like this one. JSN or Devontae Adams, and then Joe's boy and Yoko or Andrews. So I'll take. So to me, I mean, we touched on this earlier. JSN is turning into the number. Not that Devontae Adams is not the number 1 guy at the Jets, but JSN is definitely the number 1 guy there. Adams hasn't been there long enough to create really a rhythm with the Jets, I don't think. I mean, not that Rodgers and Adams haven't played together before and have a little bit of a rhythm, but I think JSN, and we said it before, he's got 30 targets over the last few games and is kind of the go-to guy. Rodgers is not the same guy to get the ball to Adams. Your thoughts on that one before we get to the tight ends?
Yeah, I mean, Adams probably. So Adams' best game with the Jets was that Thursday night Halloween against Houston, 7 for 91 and a touchdown. He went 6 for 72 last week. Obviously, you got Garrett Wilson on the other side. Adams will probably end up having one big game. I don't know when it's going to be, but I don't want to play. I'm not playing that lottery with him when you got JSN sitting there with, what was it? We counted it. You just said it.
30.
It was actually 31. We were off one. 31 targets the last 3 games, 23 catches, 367 yards, and 3 touchdowns.
Yeah.
I mean, other than Justin Jefferson and Jamar Chase, who are you benching him for this week at wide receiver? In all honesty,
that's actually a very good question. And then moving over to I'll take the tight end question here. Njoku or Andrews. To me, this is really a no-brainer because we said the Philly-Baltimore games get the highest over-under of any game today, tomorrow. And so I expect Andrews to put up some points. The tough thing is, and we touched on it a little bit, maybe 15 minutes ago, is that Denver's defense is legit, man. And Cleveland's going into Denver. I can't necessarily say Njoku will outscore Andrews, whereas Andrews has that opportunity against Philly to put up some points. I don't know if you agree or disagree.
This is a tough one for me. Andrews started off horrible.
Yeah.
And now 5 out of the last 7 weeks, he's basically gone for 15 plus, but he's got 2 4-point games in there. You got Isaiah Likely, who the first half of the year played like the number 1. Now all of a sudden last week, he didn't even get a freaking target. So it does feel like in a high-scoring game, Andrews, after Zay Flowers is their second best target. You look at Nwoko, and we have to subscribe to your whole thing, Maish, about not looking at 1 week and overreacting. So last week, our good friend in the snow in Pittsburgh, despite them winning, he went for 1 catch, 9 yards, 5 targets, and dropped a touchdown pass. Not good. But prior to that, he went for 9, 5, 5, 10, and 5 receptions, 2 touchdowns, and a little over 200 yards. But it's a night game on the road, good Denver defense. At the beginning of this, I was actually closer to 50-50. I think now Andrews is probably the right play there, but it's so weird to sit in Njoku at this point.
Well, it's funny because since we're talking about tight ends, dude, tight ends this year has been so bizarre. Yeah. So you got, I drafted Kincaid early thinking he was going to be the target. Boom, he was going to be a monster this year, and he has not panned out that way. Then you got McBride. So McBride has had some good games, hasn't gotten in the end zone this year. Then you got Taysom Hill, like I said, 2 weeks ago, puts up 40. It's been such an odd year for tight ends.
And in the leader for tight ends fantasy points, at least in the league I'm looking at now on CBS, is a rookie, Brock Bowers. And he's 23 points ahead of Kittle. And then after that, you drop to, you'll never believe who's third. This is great. Who has scored the 3rd most fantasy points at tight end this year? You'll never get it.
I'll never get it. Well, then I was going to say Hill just because of the monster game you had a couple weeks ago, but who we got?
Jonnu Smith.
Oh, forgot about him, actually.
Right, out of nowhere. He wasn't even drafted.
Right. Yeah, he's been the go-to guy there, and actually had a really good game too the other night against.
Yes, and then the last thing I'll say about tight end is everybody was very, very quick to shit on Mrs. Taylor Swift the first half of this season, and now Travis Kelce is sitting at the 4th most points at tight end through 13 weeks or through 12 weeks.
But he did have some big drops, or I think a couple drops. Yes, or 2 days ago on Black Friday, first Black Friday. I believe that's the first Black Friday game. They didn't do one last year, right? I don't think so. That's the first one I recall, at least. So,
yes.
But I think we got another one checking in from Trans-Siberian. Let's see here. It was all right. Thanks, boys, and good luck with your DFS today. See you next week. Nice, AJ and JSN. My big trifecta today. There you go, bro. Hey, man. And him.
I like Nico.
Got you. It's not nice. He was saying Nico, AJ, and JSN. That dude, that is big time. And now I know why you're in first with a trio like that, man. That's kick ass. So appreciate the encouragement, and hopefully, we can cash out too. So
we will redeem the Kareem Hunt play.
I mean, dude, that's such a kick in the teeth, especially when I had sitting on my bench, man.
They won. I mean, I don't know. It's so.
Yeah. And then Pacheco coming back. I mean, well, actually, here's a question for you, and I guess I'll throw this at. And I don't know what Mike thinks too on this. Is Pacheco viable heading into the playoffs at the end of the year here? Is Hunt going to fall off? Pacheco ended up having more points than Kareem Hunt. Looks like they're going to work him back into the mix. Is he really a good start heading into next week and then into the playoffs?
I think as long as he's healthy, yes. Next week, I could see them still maybe, nursing him along. I mean, the Chiefs, for all this talk about how they're playing in one-score games, and I agree, they don't need to win any of these freaking games. They're already like one win away from the freaking bye week, because as great as Baltimore is, their schedule, they're 8-4, 8-3. They've got losses. Now they've got to contend with Buffalo from a bye perspective still a little bit. But KC's they don't have to sweat it. So I do think they'll bring Pacheco along slowly. The thing with Hunt, and his volume's been amazing, but he's under 4 yards a carry. He hasn't been great. He's just gotten a shit ton of touches, and he started kind of quick. So I think as long as Pacheco's healthy, he is their starting running back going forward. It's just a matter of whether that really, fantasy-wise, does that take shape next week, or does it still take a couple more weeks?
I guess time will tell. I think we got another couple questions coming in here from our boy Jacob checking in. Burrow or Daniels? Dude, this is a tough one. And I'll start. So, man, we were talking about Daniels. I don't know if he caught us talking about Daniels maybe 15, 20 minutes ago, but I'm not looking at the numbers in front of me, but I'd have to lean Joe Burrow, even though that's a tough matchup there against Pittsburgh. Tremendous defense, but Burrow's been very consistent. Him to Jamar Chase has just been guns blazing, man. These guys have been going off, and he doesn't have the running ability that Daniels does, but like we said before, we have seen Daniels kind of fall off a little bit outside of last week, which we were nervous about through the first, however, 3.5 quarters it was. So I'm a little bit more confident in Burrow than Daniels, even though Daniels is a great option on his legs. What do you think, Joe?
No, this is a really good question. So when you talk about like Hurts versus Daniels, you're talking about two guys who could potentially score the rushing touchdown and rush the ball. It's interesting because I don't think there's another quarterback other than Burrow that doesn't rush the ball that you would consider over Daniels. But on DraftKings anyways, 3 weeks in a row, Burrow's been over 30. Now, the caveat to that, though, is the 3 weeks previous, he was under 20. But Cincinnati pretty much has to run the table to make the playoffs. They're home against Pittsburgh, which is a tough matchup. But I did look back. Jamar Chase has still been pretty good against Pittsburgh. And you just see this game, even if it's low scoring, Cincinnati doesn't run between the tackles much with Brown, who's been great, Chase Brown. But he's catching the ball a lot too. It just feels like everything they do offensively runs through their passing game. So even against a tough defense like Pittsburgh, as long as weather's not an issue, you got to believe Burrow's going to put up the fantasy numbers again. Where, again, Daniels probably will too, but to what extent? And the other part too, Burrow's is over 30 3 weeks in a row. I don't think any other quarterback's done that this year. How can you really sit that right now?
True. Hopefully that helps. You get another one popping up here from Jacob. So he's asking, let's see if we can get that up. We got Zay Flowers or DK full PPR. I'll let you start with this one, Joe. I kind of got my idea, but go ahead.
This one's a little bit tougher. The thing about Flowers, and I'm just trying to look at him. So his last 6 games, I'll give you 11, 11, 7, 32, 21, 4. And then you got to hear the rest of this. 25, 22, 2-5, 22, 11. I mean, we throw out the, this guy's Deshaun Jackson from a fantasy perspective. And Flowers, it's funny because it's not because he only catches 2 balls a week and it's a home run. He gets a lot of catches on the weeks where he does well, but it's like 50-50. And I think a lot of times with that, they just don't need him necessarily to win a game. This week, you would think Lamar is going to have to be good in the air to beat Philadelphia. Here's the thing about DK Metcalf. He came off the injury where he missed 3 weeks, and his last 2 weeks are 14 and 9.9. Now, granted, it's still 11 catches on 14 targets, but he's kind of the number 2 right now to JSN. Now, he can quickly correct that with a 60-yard touchdown in the first quarter, which he's known to do. However, at the Jets actually have a very highly rated pass defense right now. Man, this is really tough because the numbers tell you to go. The numbers kind of tell you to go Flowers. Ugh. Man, well, the numbers tell you to go Flowers. Metcalf is just hard to sit in general because he's got that big play potential. I'm really torn on this one. What are you thinking?
I mean, I'm just going to say Flowers just because, yeah, you said it. DK is kind of taking a step back to the number 2. Flowers is to me the clear cut. Well, I don't want to say clear cut, but he's a number 1 over there and has gotten some decent numbers. But you have them home against Philly, and then you got DK's on the road against the Jets, and you touched on their defensive prowess there. I just think because of the matchups too, you got to go Flowers and expect that game to be higher scoring than Seattle at the Jets. That's just my opinion on that one.
That I will say that's probably the toughest question of the day. Although the Daniels Jalen Hurts one is always really tough. That's definitely the toughest non-QB question of the day.
Well done, Jacob. Yeah, good luck. But we got Trans-Siberian checking in. So sadly, my opponent has Chase and Jefferson. I'm gonna ask, how the hell do you get Chase and Jefferson? What did that draft look like?
Keeper in the number 1 pick, maybe.
I guess that's just very interesting to me that the guy ended up with Chase and Jefferson. So
let me ask you a question, Jeff, because you more than anybody hates reacting to 1 week.
Mm-hmm.
Do you feel like Justin Jefferson's going to go off this week and just immediately autocorrect last week?
I wouldn't necessarily. When you got Sam Darnold as your quarterback, I can't necessarily say it's going to be an automatic. It's really tough to tell, man. Minnesota's been kind of riding the coattails of their defense and not necessarily their offense. And they have, when you got Addison, you got Hawkinson, you got Aaron Jones, you got Cam Akers. It's really hard to say that Jefferson will be kind of the guy. Jamar Chase, man, I'll tell you, the numbers this guy is putting up is ridiculous. It's almost like Randy Moss numbers.
Yeah.
But you can't. I mean. Do I expect a pretty good game from Jefferson? Yeah. Does he have the ability to go off? Yeah. Hard to say whether that'll happen or not with Sam Darnold back there. I can't necessarily trust that to happen. So, but Jacob, I think has one more coming up on us here. So we got Garrett Wilson or James Cook flex full PPR, and I'll leave this one to me. It's a no brainer. James Cook. We talked about it earlier. They're at home. And there's going to be some weather there in Buffalo. Looks like you're going to have to run the ball. James Cook is the guy, and he can get some passes out of the backfield. Garrett Wilson it's Aaron Rodgers has not been the guy he used to be. The Jets offense is not what we thought it would be before the season. Breece Hall, Garrett Wilson, we thought they would have a monster year, and neither one of them has panned out that way. So to me, and we always say tie goes to the running back, I got to say James Cook. I doubt you disagree.
Yeah, I can't disagree there. I mean, Wilson's been okay. Wilson's under 10 his last 2 games, by the way, too, for the Jets after a 30-point game. But it doesn't matter. There's no number there. I don't think that would change. That would say, especially given the game script with the potential weather. And Mikey's always quick to remind us, too, whether it's a rookie quarterback or it's bad weather. When you have those 2 scenarios, you got a lot of checkdowns to the tight ends and the running backs. So from a full, there it is. See, there it is. I feel
this message.
Your spirit lives on even when you're not here. And that alone, James Cook is the way to go.
Yes, sir. Yep, I agree with that. No, James Cook for sure looks like he's going to have himself a very solid game in that weather up there. Brock Purdy isn't there. This is the reason that we're in the background right here is this little thing right here. And we also got a hat for Trans-Siberian, so we stopped scaring the cat. as well. But yeah, no, James Cook, hands down, probably going to be your best bet right there for sure.
There you go. And just call him Mikey Claus, folks. Mikey Claus. We like it. And with that, I think we probably, I don't believe we have any more questions coming in. I think that kind of wraps it up for this week. So then we can end it with Mikey Claus and his horrible. Oh, I'm sorry. Hold on. One more coming in on the fly here from Trans-Siberian. We got 9th pick went to Chase, 14th. Okay, I see. I took Etienne at 13 before. Gotcha. Dude.
He's in first place with Etienne as his second round pick.
I mean, bro, that's gotta hurt though to know that you had Chase in the crosshairs. You could have had him and took Etienne because we thought Jacksonville was gonna be something, but they're not. So
is Jacob in a 4-team league?
One more here for lineup for the week is Lamar, CMC, Jacobs, AJ Brown, Zay Flowers, Kittle, Brees Hall. Well, I mean, bro, and Broncos D.
18. It's got to be an 8-team league,
bro. I mean, that's a hell of a lineup. The only one that's been a letdown really has been Brees Hall, and the Denver defense has been putting up freaking numbers too. It's probably one of you, and he chimes in. Yeah, it is an 8. We knew it couldn't be 10 with a team like that. That's solid. That's solid, especially with CMC back. So
real quick, just because we're not going to go through the whole DFS thing, but because we were talking about Chase a lot and Nico Collins, and I feel like this week, especially if you look at the main slate of games, you got Jamar Chase at wide receiver anyways. Jamar Chase, Nico Collins, and A.J. Brown, to me, feel like the 3 clearly top 3 plays of the week at wideout. And I mean, if you weren't in first place, I'd like to see the team that would be.
Well, and he chimes in and says he is, and he's number 1 for points scored. So that's not surprising, my man. Good on you for a good draft. And
that's because he's here right now, my friend.
There we go. So well done on you, brother. Let's hopefully that freight train keeps rolling, and let's hope you plow through the playoffs and just take that title. So, but at that, we will leave it with Mikey Claus and the adorable little daughter right there, and we will wish everybody luck for the games today. Any parting words there, Joseph?
Ready to go. Let's go get those clinch those playoff spots today.
That'll do it. With that, we'll close it out. Appreciate it.